When I was 21, I bought a Mustang. It was like yellow with a black racing stripe. Now it wasn't all that expensive, it was used. Also didn't have like a real engine in it. But I really thought that once I had that car, I would be cool. And as I started to drive that, I realized that I was getting my sense of self-worth from that car. When I drove it around, people looked. When I drove my early 2000s Honda Civic around, nobody looked. And therefore, I kind of got this first sense of like a thing will give me status, will give me attention, will give me something. And that's one of the things that kind of started this loop of trying to spend money in order to make myself feel better. When I was bored, if I spent money, I would feel something. So therefore I would, walk around the mall when I was bored and, just buy something that was on sale. $5, $10 later, you got a shirt that was 70% off and now you feel something. But after a while, I realized that this was not really healthy. I was kind of getting these little dopamine hits from stuff, but then eventually I had a closet that was full of stuff that I never ever used and I didn't remember where it came from. And right after the purchase, I would feel a little bit of remorse. I actually looked it up and there's some science behind this where you actually get the most enjoyment right before a purchase, and then afterwards, generally you feel a little bit of buyer's remorse. At the time, I didn't know that, but I just knew that I was kind of chasing this high of getting new stuff and distracting myself from what was truly important. Now, I realized that it was because the world has kind of sold both you and me this scam that once you get the bigger house, once you get the nicer car, then you will be happy, then you will have friends, then people will think that you're cool, and all this stuff that as I've tried for all of those things over the past, 10 years, I've realized that every one of them that I've accomplished, the car, the clothes, the whatever, none of those have made me happy. And you've probably felt this in your own life where you bought stuff that you think would be like, oh, once I have those, I'll be cool. And the next day you're like on to the next thing. Now there's some verses that have really struck me and kind of made me realize why this happens and kind of what to do instead. And so the first one being from Luke, watch out, be on your guard against all types of greed. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions. Honestly, this verse really sums up a lot of what I was feeling, where like this couldn't be more clear. First of all, like life is not built up of having a bunch of crap. And also it couldn't be more true. Every successful person that I've talked to that's actually, kind of self-aware has come to the same conclusion that it's not about the stuff. It's not about the house, it's not about the car. A lot of them, once they reach a high net worth, they actually just keep working in order to help the people around them, to help their teams, to help their families, in order to support a cause. They're no longer doing it for stuff because they've come to the point where they've spent all the money and they've realized that the car, the house, the whatever didn't make them happy. And a lot of us haven't gotten to that point yet, where I still think that once I have this, once I have this, once I have this, then I'll be happy. But people who have been there have realized this simple truth that life does not consist of an abundance of possessions. And fulfillment and self-worth and enjoyment doesn't come from spending, it comes from helping other people. It comes from building something that matters and making a difference. Now in Proverbs it says, the wise man stores up choice food and olive oil, but the fool gulps theirs down. God doesn't want us to live in a cycle of consumption, where I've heard that like some people don't think that you should save money because then you're not relying on God and that type of stuff. But whether you believe the Bible is true or not, I think these are kind of truths that speak to everybody. So if we want to be wise with this one life that we have, then we shouldn't trade that one life or little parts of it, whether it's a couple hours or a couple days of our life, for money and then spend that money on nothing. That is not a wise use of life. And so now that's where I've been really thinking about this story of Joseph for a while, where he had the 7 years of abundance, and during that time he saved a ton of stuff. And probably at the time, it didn't really make any sense to do that. Most people would think you're making a lot of money, things are getting better. This happens, when you get out of college and you get a job and you start making more money, and then you're like, okay, I can get the nicer apartment now, I can get the nicer car now, I can get all this stuff, I can level up. And then hopefully, one day when I reach the top, I can work as much as my boss and be as stressed as him, like that would be awesome. Joseph at the time, when all this success was happening, he started saving and putting things away because he knew that it was not always going to be like that. There was going to be the 7 years of famine. And I think this is kind of like a very clear picture of an emergency emergency fund, right? Where when things are good, this is a great time to start saving up because things are going to be bad. Life is very much like cycles. There's going to be good things, there's going to be bad things, there's going to be tires, there's going to be things at your house that need repaired, you're going to probably break your leg at some point. Like there's going to be ups and there's going to be down. And if you're just spending, you're constantly in that cycle of not having any money, then you're not going to be prepared for when those times get bad. And that's going to, bring up debt. And we all know what the Bible says about debt, where the borrower is a slave to the lender. And that is not something you want to be. So I think this really gives us a clear picture that A, we are not going to be fulfilled if we're constantly spending our money on stuff. And B, having an emergency fund is super important and saving up for the bad times because there are going to be bad times. And then 3, I think it's important to talk about giving. In 2 Corinthians, it says, "You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion." I don't know about you, but I read this and I kind of sat back and thought about a lot of the money I'd spent in my life. Maybe you spend money on vacation, maybe you spent money on clothes, a pair of headphones, whatever it is. And then maybe think about a time where you gave money, where you gave time for somebody who was in need. And you look at maybe the $300 pair of headphones or the time you bought somebody groceries. Which one of those made you feel better from a purely selfish perspective, not even looking at, what the Bible says about this? Which one made you feel better? Almost everybody across the board is going to say that helping people made you feel better selfishly. And when you're in a strong financial position, because you're not spending money, you're being a good steward of everything that you have, you're saving up, when a need arises, you can help somebody. Not only can you, again, selfishly keep yourself out of becoming a slave to the borrower, but you can also help other people on every occasion. What if every time there was a need that somebody around you needed something, their car was down and they were just like stressed out and there's like crazy things going on in their life and you're like, you know what, I got you. It's all good. I can take care of this. Don't worry about it. Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm a pretty firm believer that most people, if we cut out the crap spending that we do, would be in that position. Because ultimately, money is a tool. And God has a lot to say about money. I could do a whole series on this. If you guys are interested, drop a like, subscribe, and all that, and maybe I'll do another one. But money is not inherently a good or bad thing. The love of money, on the other hand, that's totally different. Not even gonna go down that road. But I look at money a little bit differently, which is as life, and we have one life. And if you think about okay, somebody's moving or something's going on and you want to donate a day of your time to help that person, that's awesome. We all would like to be in a position to be able to do that. However, there are also times where you can't donate your time and instead you could donate money. And yet a lot of us are selfishly choosing to spend it on things that actually make us less happy instead of having the opportunity to make ourselves more happy and be a blessing to people and invest in eternity. And instead we are just simply chasing the dream, and the 10,000 ads or whatever it is that we see every single day constantly are bombarded by this spend, it'll make you happy. When we've been there and we can look at people who've been there, we can read thousands of year-old scriptures about things that were just as true back then as they are today, that spending and stuff will not make us happy. I really believe that we are not called to be consumers, we're called to be stewards. And in that, we will find a lot more enjoyment and happiness. And going to the wealth aspect for a second, I think there's a lot of both sides of this, where whether you're a Christian or not, a lot of people look at wealthy people as bad inherently, that they must have done something evil or stepped on other people in order to get at a good position financially. But also there is this verse in Proverbs that says, a good person leaves an inheritance for his children's children. That's not being broke if you're leaving an inheritance for your children's children. Obviously there's different things that you could leave as inheritance, but there are tons and tons of verses about money. Like so much is said about money and being a good steward of it and using it wisely, where some people are called to make money. And I think it's almost morally wrong, again, whether you believe this or not, to just go and spend money and not try to earn money and not try to make the best use of your time possible. Because, well, especially like if you live in America, you have a much easier time than most people on the planet throughout all of history. And you have an opportunity now to impact more people's lives and help more people than you ever have in history. And I think it's morally wrong not to take advantage of that. It's one of the reasons I work as much as I do when I don't have to financially just to support myself. If I was just worried about me, I could not work all that much, but I actually work a lot because I think that is my moral responsibility to make the best of this life that I have. And when I'm in a position to be able to help a lot of people, I'm taking full advantage of that. And I think you should be as well, whether that's not spending money, whether that's earning extra money and just being a good steward of it. I think now in this time, regardless of what's going on, there's a lot of opportunity to do good out there. there at scale that we've never had before. And I think we should take advantage of that and not just be caught in this cycle of consuming and spending and just buying into random lies of stuff. So hope you enjoyed this video. I was also looking into a lot of what the Bible says on investing. So if you want me to do that, drop a like, drop a comment, and maybe we'll do that in a couple of weeks. So thank you for watching.